Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So in this video I'm going to show you guys how I was able to create a gown with this monostrap crease cut effect. So I went ahead to do my sketching just to see the way it's going to look like afterwards and the rest, and this was the sketch that I made. So I went ahead to draft out the patterns for this, and it's basically my basic bodice pattern, and then I then used a strapless bodice pattern and just drew out that crease cut effect or so. Then the next is the cutting. So I placed my patterns on my fabric, and here I have my basic skirt pattern for my front and my back. So I'm just cutting the lining for these patterns, and I'm going to iron gum stay on my top patterns. That's the top part of this um gown. So I'm just drawing in my dart here. So if you want a separate video on how to draft the patterns for this, then drop your comments, that's comment down below, and please subscribe to my channel and turn on the notification bell so you get notified on when I post new videos. So I just cut out the lining for the top part. As you can see, I pinned it down on I pinned down my main fabric on my lining, and I'm just cutting it out. So yeah, I also drew in the dots for my front part, for my front skirts, and for my back skirts I drew it in with a chalk. So the next step should be the sewing. So these are all my patterns with the lining. I just laid them down flat here so you guys can see. The next step should be the sewing and the ironing or the pressing. So like I said before, I ironed soft interfacing or gums there on the top part only. Now I'm just placing my front pieces like together and placing them right sides facing each other. As you can see, for the right and for the left hand side, and I'm just going to pin it up, and then I'm going to sew from the bottom all the way to the top and turning my fabric as I go. So these are the patterns for the back. I'm also going to pin the darts, placing it right sides and facing each other, and then I'm going to pin it because I'm going to sew up there. And so the only opening we're going to have here will be the zip seam there. That's the center back seam there. So I'm just going to sew it using 1/2 inch because that's the allowance I put in my patterns and the rest. So I'm done sewing up the darts for the front, as you can see, and I cut notches along these curves so that to lay down flat. So I also did the same for the lining. I placed the lining exactly the same way as the main fabric and sewed up the darts. So the next thing that I did was to place the right sides of my lining and my fabric together. So I'm just placing it down, and we are going to sew along the neckline and also along the crease cut, this monostrap crease cut there. So I'm sewing along the neckline all the way up there. I'm also going to sew down that part there and come down to the other armhole. So yeah, then once you're done doing this, you turn it to the right side and iron it down flat. and I'm going to do the same for the lining. I'm just going to turn the lining with the neckline. So for my skirt, I sewed up the darts for the main fabric and for the lining. So what I'm going to do now is to sew the lining to the skirt part. So I didn't want any visible seams along the hem of this skirt, so I'm just placing my um, lining and my fabric, and I'm going to sew up along the hemline because I don't want any visible seam there. So what I did was to place the two right sides of the fabric facing each other. So I matched it up, turned it. As you can see, the two right sides are like facing each other, and I'm going to sew along the hem line and also top stitch the lining. Just do a top stitch on the lining down there. So this is my lining part for the back skirt. I placed it down here, and I'm going to get my main fabric, and what I'm going to do is to place the right sides that's facing each other, like just the way I did for my front, and then we're going to sew along the hem. And I also sewed along the side seam too, because I didn't want any raw edges inside this garment, so I sewed along the side seam. And you have to make sure that you put enough allowance in, like when you're drafting your patterns and the rest. So I sewed along the hemline. I also sewed along my zip area and along the side too. So you have to make sure that you put enough allowance on your fabric. That's when you're cutting it, enough allowance. So here I'm just ironing down my patterns. As you can see, I turned it to the right side. This is my back patterns. I turned it to the right side. So this is my top part. I've joined it with the lining that's along the hemline. So I'm ironing it down flat, and I'm also going to do the same for my back pattern. As you can see, I'm done ironing it, and the center back where the zip will sit is open, as you can see. So yeah, so the next thing that we're going to do after this is to sew up my the skirt patterns. So I turned my skirt patterns like so, and I placed the back part against the front part, and we're going to sew it up by this, like along the sides. So I'm just pinning them so that I'll be able to sew it well. Then we're going to do the same for the top part. That's we're going to sew up the side seams of our top parts before joining it to the skirt. So you sew along the sides. So I just went here to get my tape. So I put my hip circumference divided by 2 here. So whatever allowance I have left should be what I'll sew it up with. I just went there just to double check. So I also got my front patterns, as you can see, and I placed the right sides of my front and my back. That's I placed the right sides facing each other, and we're going to sew up all like the sides. So I'm pinning it down, and I'm also going to place the other side too. and we're just going to sew along the sides here. So you can see there are no raw edges along the sides because I turned this with my lining and the rest. So I just went in here to also double check my waist circumference and the rest, my waist measurement. So I also pinned up the strap, this crease cut strap, monostrap, I don't know. So I also pinned it because we're going to sew there too. So yeah, then once we're done doing that, we're going to join the top part to the lower part. So this is my skirt pattern. As you can see, the center back is open because that's where we're going to place our zip. So you can go ahead and iron it down flat. As you can see, the inside is looking clean. There are no raw edges inside because I turned it with my lining. I turned the side seams with my lining. So this is my top part. So I only sew the crease cuts first, as I sewed the crease cut first, and then I went back again to pin them. So I'm just showing you guys. I went ahead to pin it back again and just sew it down. So once I'm done doing that, I'll place my front part against my skirt part. That's the top part against my skirt part. That's the right sides should face each other, and then I'll pin along the waist area, and I made sure to match up my darts because in my patterns I made sure that my darts were matched up for my skirts and for the top part, and we're going to sew along the waist. So once we're done doing that, we're almost done. It's time to put in the zip. That's time to sew in the zip. Okay, so I pinned my zip along the center back that was open from the top all the way down, and I also marked the points that I wanted like my zip to stop because my zip was quite long and the rest. So I marked the parts with a pin, that I put a pin there. So here I'm just using more pins to place my zip at the center back all the way down, and I also pinned the other parts of the zip onto the other side, and I use my zip footer, like my zip foot, to sew up my zip. So yeah, so I just closed my zip, and then I'm going to turn my fabric to the wrong side so we can sew up the down part of the gown. That's the part down there along the zip that is that's open. So I'm just going to get a pin, and I'm just going to pin it, and I'm just going to run a straight stitch from the part where my zip ended. That's the part where I stopped my zip, all the way down. And once you're done doing that, you're done. Then don't forget to overlock your seams if you need to. That's the rest. So we're done with sewing the gown. This was one of the easiest projects, like easiest sewing I've ever done. It was straightforward, the pattern drafting and the sewing. So this was the end result, looking cute. So please subscribe to my channel, and you can also follow me on Facebook and Instagram at Casey Signatures. And until my next video, bye guys.